Well, welcome to Mel Wilkerson from Australia. He's been from a lot of other places. Um, I think you must have started out in Canada, didn't you?
I did. I started in Canada and then I went to Germany from the early 80s while I was with the military. Went back to Canada and I've subsequently moved after my second retirement to Australia, where I've settled down here.
So you
In
double
Australia, I'm
dipping?
still considered new to the country and a blow in because I've only been here less than 20 years. I think it's
Oh,
18 years now.
okay. Well, how many years does it take to be whatever?
Uh, well, according to my wife, probably I'll never make it.
Oh, jeez.
But it's one of those things that just it's here. If you're from somewhere else, you're a blow-in until you're firmly established, and that usually happens about 2 weeks before your funeral.
Oh my gosh. Well, have you ever boxed a kangaroo?
No, I have not.
Have
Although
you?
I have handled a number of kangaroos in my previous job with council. So,
Okay. Just had to get that out of the way. Um, I could always ask the question they always ask is how does it feel to be sitting upside down?
well, I really don't know. You'd have to tell me because it's all a matter of perspective, isn't it?
Well, it is, but if
I do want to dispel one myth though.
oh good.
The toilets and the sinks do not go the other way.
Huh. I'll be darned. That crushes me. Well, if we call you guys down under, what do you call us? Upovers?
Back home.
Back home. Oh, that's good. Excellent.
That's going to be my safe answer.
That's good.
Uh, I don't know. In Can and most of it is just over the pond, but then in the UK they say that about North America, and North America says that about Europe. So over
Uh,
the pond is pretty much relative, and it covers everybody, I think.
ah, okay. Well, let's start out with the hardest question in the package here. Describe yourself in one word.
Hmm,
That's it.
that's a tough one. One word to describe me. I could ask my wife, but I don't know if that'd be able to be recorded in
I was
public.
going to say, yeah,
Uh,
keep it clean.
one word. I'd like to think integrity,
Okay.
but I'd have to interpret that.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm. It's it's almost egotistical sometimes, and it gets me in trouble. But I like to do things right
Yeah.
and do them for the right reasons.
I might have said versatile. You do a lot of
Uh,
things.
um,
I,
I actually wouldn't say that about myself.
hmm,
For those of you that know me, I know Wendy and Jeff will probably back me up on this. If I think I'm right, I'll argue about what my position is, and I'll provide the facts and the figures and everything else about what my position is. But that being said, I don't mind at all being proved wrong. It's just when I think I'm right, I'll change my mind, but you prove me wrong, I'll accept that. And that sometimes puts me in a contrary position, but I usually try to stand from a position of factual base, and I stand by what I say. I say what I mean what I say. And it's just that personal integrity that says if I'm committing myself to do something, I'm going to do my best to do something. If I'm going to take a position, I want to be able to take that position from a position of knowledge and informed objectivity rather than just an emotive response. And sometimes, as Helen would say, that's probably one of my biggest strengths, but it's also one of my biggest weaknesses because I don't get overly emotional about things.
uh, well, that's okay. Now, what would how would your parents say as a square dance caller what you do? Could they describe it?
My father could. He got involved in square dancing when he lived up north. They lived up in the Fort St. John area, and after I had moved, I had joined the army fairly early. While they were living up there, he got into square dancing, and they've been to a couple of my dances, so they have a baseline understanding of what it is. But as far as what I do and how I do it, not really. They he watches a lot of the training videos. He watches some of the videos on YouTube, and it's still all just a bunch of people having fun, dancing around, moving to him, and that's about it.
Ah,
His perception is still like many perceptions. It's an old-fashioned activity that is fading away. It's a lot of fun, but it's something that sits way back in the periphery of the mind that only comes up when it does come up in conversation. It's usually when it's around me, or he says, loses something, say, oh yeah, my son's a square dance caller. And that's to generate a conversation starter, but it doesn't really go much further than that as far as I know.
okay, that's good. Um, if you could be remembered for one thing, and I won't limit it to the square dance activity either, because I like these interviews to be about the person, not just the person,
Mm-hmm.
the square dance caller part. But if you could be remembered for just one thing, what do you think that might be?
That is an insanely difficult question. Um, I suppose for me, the essence, I've brought this through regulatory compliance as a teacher. I brought this through the Rangers as a teacher, through weeds, through the language studies, through interpretation, through the military, and also into square dancing. Is I love I love to teach, and I love to impart that knowledge and watch the light bulbs come on. But and I know this is going to sound really corny. My ideal thing to remember is the idea of pass it on. If you learn anything from me and you're ever in a position to help somebody else, regardless of, whether it's the military, regulatory, compliance, weeds, square dancing, whatever, and you get the opportunity to help somebody develop those skills in themselves, pass it on. That's it. Just pass it on. Don't charge them for it. Don't do anything unless it's part of a formal organization school. But if you can help somebody, help them out. Pass on that skill and that knowledge. It's the only way we're going to survive. And that's really, I think, if you had to say for me, I'd say pass it on.
It's a good one.
I know it sounds corny, but that's just the way I feel about things.
No, well, I think when you look at the people that are participating on this particular Zoom session, I would say pretty much we all would vote for that, definitely. Um, it's what we do, you know. It isn't like when we first started. I don't know about you when you first started, but when I first started, um, first off, I had a face. Um, if you look at that picture, that's something else. Um, it was very competitive. Ridiculous because we had so many dancers. You know, we had thousands and thousands of dancers, and
Mm.
yet the callers were very protective of their knowledge. With me, I asked the caller that taught me, how do you know how to do this? And he just looked down at me. He was a big guy, and he just barked out zeros and equivalents. I said, "Oh, yeah, sure, okay, got that." I had no idea. So anyhow, going back to, I shouldn't say the beginning because we're not going to go that far back. Um, were you a good student in high school?
I was a contrary student in high school. I was one of
I,
those anomalies. I learned a lesson from my grandfather very, very early, and that was if you want to know something to get a good mark, learn what the teachers teach you. If you want to get a job, learn what they require to get the marks. If you want to know something, learn it for yourself. And I sort of grew up that way. And I was one of those students that was always asking why. When they'd say, who discovered North America? And you've got Christopher Columbus is there. And I'd go, well, wait a minute. Before him was, the Vikings. Before them was these people. Before them was, oh, are you talking the east side or the west side? Are you talking, and I would ask all of these questions because I always wanted to know the why. I would say I was probably contrary because I always wanted to know more and dig deeper into what it is that is being presented. I'm not a surface person when it comes to that kind of education and learning. So in school, it was an anomalous kind of thing because I was just a C plus average student in school, which is middle of the road. But if ever anybody needed tutoring in any of the classes I was taking, I was always recommended to tutor them, which made absolutely no sense because there was a lot of kids that knew the subjects or appeared to know the subjects a lot better than me. I just like to go deep into them. And I tried to bring that through all the aspects of my life. When I produce something, when I write something, when I teach something, I try to understand the why of something, because if I can understand the why of something, it's a lot easier to present the how and the what of something. And I've just sort of brought that philosophy through pretty much everything I do.
Uh,
Not always successfully, I might add, but I try.
well, that's that's like a lot of things in our life, isn't it? We
Mm.
try our best, and we have to live with whatever happens. So, what instrument did you play in high school or in school?
I actually didn't play any instruments other than, you know, elementary school, the recorder, which I think everybody has to take. I'm pretty sure that the recorder was an instrument that was not invented as a musical instrument, but by some teacher that had an argument with a parent somewhere, and it was their form of revenge that took off. Um, I did try and start learning to play guitar after I returned from Germany in '84, and after 30 years, I can play probably about half a dozen songs really bad, but I still have my guitar. And
Good.
that's about it as far as musical instruments go. I for some reason collect flutes, you know, different flutes. I've got an Aztec flute. I've got a little turtle shell flute. I've got all sorts of different little flutes and instruments, but I don't play them with a damn. I just collect them for some reason. It's kind of like walking sticks. I have a collection of those, but I don't
You don't
actually
walk.
use them when I go walking. I just collect them for some reason.
Yeah, I guess you got to walk to use a walking stick. Um,
Fair enough.
yeah. Are you going to play us a tune on the guitar then?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Just
Absolutely not.
just thought I'd ask. Okay. So, when did you must have probably started by learning how to square dance first? What was that all about?
Well,
Circumstances.
my history with square dancing, like most people in Canada in the mid early '70s, high school had square dancing on the curriculum, and it was one of the things that was there as a regular part of the phys ed class. When I went to high school, they had just come up with this new concept of teaching called electives, so that you actually got to pick your topic. So it wasn't phys ed or gym as a collective thing. You could take basketball, you could take fencing, you could take hockey, you could take football as individual sports, and that would be your full semester. And one of the things that was there was ballroom dancing, another one was square dancing. And when I was that age, I realized that, yeah, the cool kids may get the girls on the football field and the sports, but if you ever wanted to have fun at a dance, you better learn how to dance, because all the girls would ask you to go to the dance because girls like to dance, boys like to sit in the corner and try and look cool. And if you could dance, generally you could get a girlfriend. So it was purely mercenary at that point. But nonetheless, square dancing at that time was records from the 1930s and 40s. I think the most current record on the curriculum was Dominique, from the singing nun Dominica, Nika, Nika, which was the new thing in school. And of course, you spent, I think, 3 weeks learning how to do this routine to this song. Then you could perform it in front of your parents or an assembly, and you'd learn about 3 or 4 things. And if you did it correct, that was your square dance mark. And okay, it was okay, but it was absolutely horrific as an experience, something that was okay for class, okay for the mercenary reasons I was doing it, but something I would never want to do in real life. And so that was the end of it. And it was such a bad, horrific experience. Later on, after I left school, I joined the army and I was posted over to Europe. So I was with NATO, the NATO forces over there. And I did not drink beer. I didn't like beer, which was the common thing for soldiers, go out and have a few beer and everything else afterwards. So I was in Lar, and there was a lot of Canadian activities going on, and there was a movie theater there. So I decided to go to the movie one night. I don't know what it was, but it was just to pass the night. And how I got involved in square dancing was actually through belly dancing. I was going to the movies, and they had the lower part, which was the theater. Then upstairs was a couple of conference rooms and staging rooms and meeting rooms. And there was probably about 30 very, very good looking, very scantily clad girls in belly dancing outfits going upstairs to do their belly dancing class. And me, being the typical Canadian soldier, decided to follow along to see what was going on. So I followed along, and the door was partially open. So I sort of stood there watching them. And across the hall, I heard this country music playing, and I love country music. So I wandered over because, well, two reasons for that. One, they saw me standing outside the door and closed the door. And two, I was interested in the country music. So I looked in, and there was a square dance club going there. And that was Kim Lindner, Merv Lindner's son, for those of you that don't know Merv Lindner, but quite a popular caller back in his day. And Kim was his son. He was in the American Army in Karlsruhe. And he was the club caller for the Schwarzwald Tanzers, or the Black Forest Dancers at that time. And they had two and almost a third square, one man short. And I opened the door. So they hauled me in and dragged me around and everything else. And I found that I enjoyed it. And it was so radically different from what I had done in school, because it was lively, it was entertaining. They were doing things that I learned in school that took 3 weeks in 30 seconds. And you would learn that, and you would use it, and you'd progress, and you were actually dancing, not standing. There was no entertaining block. It was just pure fun, pure frolic, and nobody really cared that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I had what callers would define, or dancers would define, as probably the worst introduction to square dancing ever. In other words, I was pulled into a mainstream square, and I was pushed, pulled, and dragged 6 ways from Sunday. I had no idea what I was doing, because other than the basics that I learned in school, this was all brand new. But the gift of it was, it didn't matter, because although I was being pushed and pulled around and touched, turned around, and directed, we got through it. Everybody was welcoming, everybody was friendly, it was lively, it was great, it was entertaining, and I was asked to come back. And then Kim and a few of the dancers there, I would come back. They would start from 7 to 11, which was the normal dance night. And they said, well, if you want to come about 5:36, we can come down here, have lunch, and go from 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock, and we'll start teaching you. And this is essentially how I learned to square dance.
Wow.
And it was great. I've never looked back since then. He got me into calling, he got me into dancing, he got me into developing this, but more importantly, he got me into that mindset of, it doesn't really matter what age you are. Our youngest dancer was 6 in the club. The oldest dancer was 96. And it was absolutely fantastic, because everybody danced. The music was fast, it was lively, it was upbeat, it was interactive. Some people didn't speak English, some people didn't speak German, but we all interacted, and we had that social bond together that said to me, this is what it should be. It's not about the dance, it's about everybody getting together, having that fun, having that entertainment, and wanting to be part of that collective. So that's really got me into square dancing. Now, for those of you that were ever at the National Convention in Canada, I did a radio interview, which I told this similar story. It was supposed to be a 30-second soundbite. And I was asked, why did I start square dancing? And I told a similar story. Unfortunately, I glibly said, well, I saw these girls in belly dancing costumes, so I followed them upstairs because I was hoping to get laid. That was the expression of why I started square dancing. And I won't deny that wasn't true. They were good looking girls, and hey, maybe I'll get a girlfriend. That was why I joined square dancing, because that's what got me upstairs when I heard the music. That's not why I stayed. I stayed because of Kim and the club that just made it so much fun, that made me wanted to do it. And I've never looked back.
Wow. And that led to your calling. So what did, was that like somebody said, here's the mic, it's your turn?
Well, that was a progress thing. In Germany, We had our club caller, Kim Lindner. He was in the military. I was in the military. And of course, Andy Himberg Larson was also in the Canadian military. He called for Baden Solingen. And we used to flip clubs back and forth through our military careers. But at one point, Kim was being posted back stateside. And we had a person in the club who was, I would say, he was not a great caller, but I would call him a consummate caller. He was an absolutely fantastic teacher. He could teach you how to dance. He could teach you the movements. He could teach you the nuances and explain it so you could understand it. But the timing, the rhythm, the presentation, and the showmanship that goes into that was a bit lacking. And so he guided me in the teaching techniques, as did Kim. But Kim knew I liked to sing, knew I liked to play a little bit. So he got me into calling. So Kim taught me the aspects of calling and the basic fundamentals of calling. And Peter King taught me the basic fundamentals of being able to say something and teach something one way, but having to explain it 4 different ways because everybody learns different. So that was a brilliant combination for me. So late in 81, I started calling, and I had a fairly good singing voice back then. And I would travel around, and I was one of those token Canadian foreign callers in Germany, which was always a big thing. And because I could do really good singing calls, which are basically simple, my patter calling was absolutely horrific at that time, but I was considered somebody to go and dance to and somebody to have fun. And I tried to make it fun, but it was really the club and the dancers that traveled with you that made the events no matter where you go. So I owe them so very much.
Okay. Um, so, what can you remember, or do you think you ever had a really bad dance?
I've told this story as an anecdote, and a few of you probably heard me tell it. I had probably there's 2 instances. One dance was the very first dance I went out as a new caller and called for a group of dancers somewhere else. And that was at the Karlsruhe Club. The caller there was Jim Harrington, and I was a brand new caller. And I got up there absolutely terrified. And believe it or not, even now, when I get behind the mic, I still get butterflies. It's when I don't get that feeling, I get worried. Anyway, I got up there and I had practiced and practiced and practiced as new callers do, probably over practiced, over prepared, got down, and I got my brand new microphone that I had just purchased. And I didn't realize that these brand new microphones that were provided by Hilton Audio had a little circuit in that sucks all the information out of your brain just as you're about to start using them. So I got up and I started calling, and I could not resolve the square. I was going through my resolution technique. I'd pair them up, I'd get in a 2-face line, but no matter what I tried, I could not resolve that square. They were always crossed every single time. And it became a running joke. They would go crisscross, and put the fingers up. Oh, geez, I blew it again. I think once in the whole evening, I actually resolved the square. And they went crisscross, put it up. And I went, and they all started laughing because I actually got it right for a change. And I felt so small. My face was burning. I was forcing myself to get through it. I cut the pad like it was only a 4-minute record, and we're taught you go once through the record. That's it. If you have to reset, you reset quickly, resolve, you end your tip. You end your patter call. That's it. You don't keep the dancers on the floor for 6, 8, 10, 12 minutes. That's just absolute stupidity. And then you do your singing call. So I finished the patter. I did the singing call. I got through it. It was a comfortable singing call. Everybody was applauding and polite applause. Meanwhile, I'm just absolutely furious with myself. My face feels like I've just been sprayed in the face with 100% pure pepper spray. I was so angry and frustrated at myself. I walked out the back of the hall after saying thank you politely. And at that time, I was smoking in the Army. And I think probably in about 3 seconds, I downed 4 full cigarettes. I was just trying to relax. Anyway, that was my worst experience, I thought. But that's also where I got the best advice and the best compliment for me wanting to carry on as a square dance caller. And that's Jim Harrington came out, and I don't know if any of you have ever met Jim, but he's a very, very likable, very passive, very mellow type person. And he come out and he said, "You're a good caller." And brand new. And it was just, what? He says, "No, you're going to be a really good caller." I said, "Well, how can you say that? I couldn't do anything. I couldn't." I said, and so he turned me around to look at the floor. The hall was on an up. They were laughing. They were having a good time. And you heard them laughing and everything else. I said, "Yeah, they were laughing at me." I says, "No, they weren't." Or he said, "No, they weren't laughing at you. They were having a good time." And it doesn't matter if you are calling to whatever floor. If they're laughing and they're having a good time, even if you call Alaman, left, do, si, do, and right and left grand, and those are the only three movements you call all night. If they're laughing and having a good time, you're a good caller. And that was the best advice I ever got. And I sort of tried to take that with me through my calling. Is it's about the dancers having that entertainment and having that experience that they can share. All I am is just a medium to present that. So now that was my worst and my best piece of advice I ever got. My worst night of calling is, as new caller, I went down to call for another fella, Bob Moffat, who was another caller that was a very big influence on me, and I respected him an awful lot. And he asked me to go and call for his club down in Heidelberg one night. And I was prepared. I was so prepared. Everything was absolutely perfect. I had my modules down there. I had practiced. I could tell you verbatim what I was going to call each tip, each module. It was there as a reference. And I got up, and it was, pitch was on, the singing call was on, the patter was on, the resolutions were perfect. There was no mistakes that I could actually feel. The timing was good. It was the worst dance I ever called. The dancers danced. They had an okay time. It was a neutral floor. And the reason was I was so prepared on the technicalities of calling and getting it right. I had no life. I had no energy. I just wanted to be perfect technically so that I gave these dancers a good time. But I wasn't giving them what was needed, which was the energy, that interpersonal connection or that enjoyment. Because if I wasn't feeling it, I was bringing them down. Even though the choreography was good, I was bringing them down because I was focused on the mechanics, not the fun. So I would say that my most successful dance that I didn't make mistakes on, that I had over prepared for, was the worst dance that I'd ever called. And that was early on. And those are two of the biggest lessons that I took away from it. Long answer to a short question. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I've, I've had some long questions, had short answers for. Um, so, what's one of the craziest things that has happened at a dance for you?
Well, I've thankfully never had somebody die on a dance floor. I have had people taken out with a heart attack and trying to recover that. Those aren't crazy things. Those are the reality of things that happen. Um, the craziest thing that ever happened on a dance floor, I think, was discovering that there's no badge, and badges were very important in Europe. There was no badge for having a crippled square. I was at a dance, I believe it was either in Hamburg or in Frankfurt at one of the dances. And it was a big festival, and we got up on the floor, and there was 7 of us in the square that had casts on, and one had a walker. And these were leg casts, walking casts, arm casts. And it was just, how we got through it, I have absolutely no idea. But it was a square full of very injured people, and we all showed up at this dance, and it was just too hilarious not to pass up. So that was probably one of the oddest things that's ever happened in a square.
Okay, can
Not
you?
as exciting as some of the other stories, but it's always sort of stuck with me that if you want to do it, you'll find a way.
Oh yeah. Um, I forgot. I forgot what I was going to say. Um, oh yeah. Have you ever had to call when you were not feeling too great? And I don't mean physically, but some sort of thing might have happened in your life that was,
Oh
like a
yeah,
parent passing away, sort of a thing.
very, 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 very much so. I had one night. I think Jeff, you were probably at this dance. Um, I had just got back. I was being deployed to Africa. I just got back off a deployment and I was supposed to be at home for 6 months. And 8 days later, I found out I was having to go to Africa. So I had this massive amount of vaccinations, injections, and everything else, which you're supposed to get several weeks apart, but being the military the way it is, you get them all at once. And I went to the dance. I felt all right, so I couldn't get another caller to fill in for me. I went to the dance, and about 7 o'clock, they all started reacting with each other. So my temperature went through the roof, but my mind also went through the roof. And it was just everybody say, wow, he's really, really crazy tonight. He's going all over the place. The calling was good, but it was just like such high energy because I was on this euphoric nightmare of medication. So that was a really, really high upbeat dance, but everybody's trying to figure out what's going on with him tonight. The saddest one I ever had was not a New Year's dance, but a dance right after New Year's, where I did a lot of songs and everybody was complimenting on, oh wow, you get so much emotion into your music. And there was things like It's Crying Time Again or all these sad songs. It was a night of ballads, but it was entertaining, it was fun, but it was probably the hardest night of calling. I was very much in love with one of my ex-wives, and I found out just before the dance that she's off with somebody else, totally blindsiding me, absolutely unknown, and I could not even think about getting somebody at that short notice to go and call the dance. So I brought all that emotional baggage with me, and that was my release with square dancing. But I do apologize to anybody that was at that dance because the tone of the music was all sad songs, but they all seemed to enjoy it. But that was probably the hardest dance I ever called. Was me carrying that baggage through.
Oh yeah. Okay. See. Well,
Hey,
now.
you asked for the
Yes.
truth, you get the truth.
No, that's good. No. Along those same lines, how did you meet your wife of today?
My wife today.
Yep. Or your
Yeah,
partner?
you're struggling a bit to find the way to phrase that question, weren't you, Joe?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Okay. The
been there,
normal
done.
answer is how did you meet your wife? My normal response is which one?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Right.
uh, I
How
think
many?
Dawn is here. Dawn would usually say something like, which one are you on now? um, Actually, my current wife is not a square dancer. I didn't meet her through square dancing. I did meet my first wife through square dancing, but I actually met Helen when I was in the Army. I used to play Trivial Pursuit online with a lot of people, and we met in a Trivial Pursuit chat room. And I had a lot of friends in the Australian military because I was bouncing around the world for 25 years playing soldier. And I had worked with a lot of Australians. And after I had retired from the military in 2022, I was still getting called into the Army to do various odd jobs that I had, different skill sets to do. So I would get called back into service even after I'd retired. And at one point, I lived in a place called Nelson, BC, which is a beautiful little town. And it's a glacier mountain town in the Rocky Mountains. And I was sent back to Bosnia to deal with an organized crime issue. And during that time, I went, okay, this is fine. I can go back to an empty house because my wife and I had separated at that time, an empty apartment, or I can travel. And Australia was one of the countries I wanted to go to when I joined the Army, but it's one that I had never got to. There was Australia and Antarctica. I'd pretty much been everywhere else. So I decided I'm going to pay the difference and go to Australia. Well, the difference was around $50. So I flew to Australia and I met some of the friends that I had in the military. And one of the places that I had friends was at the Army base in a place called Wagga Wagga, an Air Force base. So where Helen lived is a place called Tumut, which is only about 100 kilometers away. So when I was coming over, I had talked to her in the chat room. I said, well, would you like to get together for coffee? I'm coming here to Wagga. It's only 100 Ks away. I can rent a car and drive down. She decided to rent a car and drive up, which I suppose in hindsight at the time was a safety mechanism. That's, oh, nice to meet you. Have a coffee. Bye. Never see you again, which was her safety out, I think, at the time, which I can't say as I blame her. You're some weird guy from Canada you met on the internet. Anyway, we got together for coffee. We hit it off and we started hanging out. I spent the rest of my time here with Helen. And then as I went back to Bosnia and then back out, and then the army kept calling me back in, so I kept coming back to Australia, and Helen and I would visit, and then we would get together. So we were maintaining this very long distance relationship. And eventually we decided, well, this long distance relationship is stupid. Does she want to move to Canada? Do I want to move to Australia? Do we want to make this into something? Well, her kids were still in school. Mine were grown and gone. So I packed up and I moved to Australia. And I've been here ever since. We're now going on to 18 years.
Wow. Super.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah,
good.
but she doesn't dance. She has absolutely no interest in square dancing. And this is the other side of the story that I often tell. I have absolutely total support for her decision of not wanting to square dance because of the impression that square dancers left her with. And that seems like a negative, but it is one of the realities. When I decided to move, I had a lot of air miles, so I had Helen come over to Canada, and we had a barbecue square dance farewell type event for me leaving. And Helen came with me. She didn't dance, but she says, okay, well, I'll keep an open mind, give it a try. And she came down, and we're sitting at the barbecue. And these two ladies came down and sat next to her and said, hi, how are you? And they introduced themselves. This is how Helen recanted the story. And says, oh, so you square dance in Australia? He says, no, I don't square dance. I've never learned. Oh, okay then. And they got up and they left. And it was just, wow, that was rude. And then two other ladies that, part of the club, but they weren't dancing anymore. They came over and they sat next to her. And I think one was in her 80s, another one was probably late 70s. Didn't even say hi. They sat down and they proceeded to have a conversation over her about their various ailments and their gallbladder operation and what their grandkids did and all this other kind of stuff, and just totally ignored her. And it was absolutely nothing. And it was the worst experience of welcoming because it just got very around. Oh, she's not a square dancer. They'd get up and dance. Oh, we're going to dance now. And that was about the only conversation they would have for it. It was very, very rude. It was very centered because for some people, square dancing was their entire life. And if you didn't square dance, they didn't want you as part of their life. It was unfortunate, but that was the impression that Helen got. And so, like I said, it's entirely her choice. She knows she's always welcome. If I ever do get my club up and running here, once we get the house built, she may give it a try, but I'm not going to push her because your experiences and your memories are what make you who you are. And if that's her experience of square dancing, that's never going to change because perception is reality. And if we give this perception of what square dancing is, well, we've lost a dancer for life. Maybe if she comes to a dance or hears it or hears what goes on, she may change her mind. But until that set of circumstances happens that her perception is going to change, I have to support her decision. That said, Helen is absolutely 100% supportive of me and my hobbies, and she supports me with square dancing. And I go to the festivals and things like that. If there's something going on, like in the Blue Mountains where the convention was, we were going to go down there and she would do all her shopping and everything else while I was off doing square dancing. Total support, but absolutely no interest. And I think that's important, that if you have an interest in square dancing, that's great, but don't inflict, and I say this sincerely, don't inflict your desires and your passions on other people. Welcome them into it, let them make that choice for themselves. And there's a lot of callers I know, there's a lot of dancers I know, their partners don't square dance, but they're supportive. The ones that have the hard time are the ones that force their partners to join them or force them to be part of an activity that they really have no interest in.
Good point.
So
Yep.
that's how I met Helen and the story.
And you're going to stick to that story, are you? Yeah. Okay.
I'm sticking to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
she tells it slightly different. She says, well, I met her and her father had a shotgun. She was going to use that, but she cries now because 18 years she'd just be getting out of prison. But
That's right. Yeah. And be a free woman.
I love her, dear. I kid you not. She is absolutely perfect. I am absolutely spoiled. For the longest time, me being in the military, I'd wake up in the morning and I'm a morning person, which drives a lot of people crazy. I don't sleep at the best of the time, so I usually go 3, 4 hours of sleep a night. And as a morning person, it's hard for me just to lay there. And it was the hardest thing. My biggest complaint, I realized about 3 years into our relationship, my biggest complaint about Helen was on Saturday morning, she would bring me a coffee, my book, and say, stay there, read, stay out of my way while I clean the house and get things going for the day. That was hard for me. And until about 3 years later, I realized this has been going on and I'm complaining about this. How bloody stupid and how bloody lucky am I to have a woman like that in my life? And so again, I'm the one that had my perspective wrong. So, and it's just little lessons like that. Absolutely wonderful woman.
Well, I guess one thing you might take away from that is to keep that process going, you have to make the house dirty so she has a reason on Saturday morning to want to clean.
Oh, well,
That work?
I think I'm going to go with Wendy's reaction on that one. We do have, however, I did find in Australia, we do have what's called a magic table in our living room.
Oh, yeah.
Have any of you other guys ever had one of these magic tables?
We
It's
probably.
absolutely amazing. You can have your meal, you set the stuff on this table, you can walk away from it. The next day, it's washed, it's clean, and put in the cupboard. You can take your dirty clothes, just throw them on this table. You can put anything you want, throw it on this table. And when you come back the next day, it's all washed, put away, clean, everything. We've got this magic table in our house. It's absolutely fantastic.
I think
You know what I'm
my,
talking about, don't you, Wendy?
I think mine would be magic. That stuff would disappear. Shame on you. You're giving us all a bad reputation now.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm a firm believer that any man that wants equality, or sorry, any woman that wants equality with a man lacks ambition. They are so far beyond us now already. It's just incredible. Why would they come down to our level?
yeah. Good point. So, what do you do in your spare time, if you have any such a thing?
Uh, well, generally, I this Christmas was the first Christmas that I've had off in 17 years. Uh, and it was hard. I generally try to fill in the spare time that I have. I try to keep busy doing things. I did get a very serious back injury at work, so I basically lost the use of my left leg and all the nerves down. It's been repaired and back up. I got about 60 to 70% use of my leg now, but that took dancing out of the picture. That took walking. That took archery. All these other kind of activities like tennis and stuff out. So a lot of the time I write. I look at technical reports. It's pretty boring stuff, really. I walk our dog, which is Moo. She's out around here somewhere, and I just fill it in the best I can. A lot of it, I do some online gaming with some friends of mine, or I look at square dance choreography, or I write. I got involved with Barry Wanson on Behind the Mic magazine. And for those of you that don't subscribe to Behind the Mic, it is online as well. But it's a great magazine, and it's one of those that's designed for callers for teaching, but also just for information on a myriad of topics. So I sort of co-edit that and do a lot of the formatting on that. It's a monthly magazine that comes out. We actually received some really, I think the biggest compliment we had was a couple of the callers associations in the States called us up one month because they have a monthly callers meeting. And they schedule their meeting around the magazine because they pick topics of the magazine to be their focus for the callers meeting. And so, well, that's very, very flattering. And we take it. And one of the things I really like about it is it doesn't matter. Like, let's just say, Wendy, you write an article on linear cycle has 4 movements. And I write an article that says linear cycle has 5 movements. And Mickey says, no, linear cycle has 3 movements. You all know what I'm talking about with the current discussion. It's one of those that magazines that even if callers have contrary opinions or contrary points of view on how something should be approached, Barry takes the approach that everybody's point, everybody's opinion is a valid opinion. And as long as it's presented well and put in, if it works for you, then it works for you, because then it has value for other people. And it's not unusual to have, this is the best resolution technique followed by this is the best resolution technique, and they're talking about two different things. And those different points of view really open up a world for callers. So it's an excellent magazine. It's absolutely free. It's on the web, or you can subscribe to it and you get it sent in your mail. If it's okay with you, I'll post the link in your chat.
Absolutely. Because I forgot to do the halfway point. We normally do the time for a commercial, and that's where
Oh,
you,
well, there you go.
you know.
Well, if we're doing commercials,
Yes, yes, we are. Let's go ahead.
um, I do uh, a caller training session called the ASH caller training session. It's called ASH because we started this in 2019, just as a bunch of callers getting together and doing some online mentoring. And in early 2020, it blossomed into formal presentations talking about all things calling. And where it came about was there was a number of new callers that said, well, I went to this caller school and they talked to us about this modules. And we had a 40-minute presentation on modules. And I went back and I didn't understand. I understand corner box and partner line, but how did this work? We got up and then we were expected to call it, and then 20 callers and 10 callers later, and I really don't remember this. So we took the approach of, yeah, well, modules is not a 40-minute session. We did 6 one-hour sessions on just the basics of modules, using one module, pulling it apart, looking at how they work, and then multiple sessions after that to actually look at that one aspect of calling in depth. And we've had some great presenters on. We've had Don come on with mental image. We've had guys like Dave Prescott come on, who gave a different approach to mental image, and both him and Don complement each other. We get into the details on that, and that's my ASH caller training session. And that runs now fortnightly. We used to do it weekly, but we've been going now for 4 years on that one. And that we do that every Sunday at 9 a.m. Sydney, Australia, or not every second Sunday, 9 a.m. Sydney, Australia time. And if you're looking for resources, Mark Hart is here. He posts all these sessions up on the Orange County Caller website. And so they're all there, all the material, all the PowerPoint presentations are there for anybody to use to review and look at. So I posted those. And I noticed Don Beck is here. Don also does caller training sessions absolutely free of charge on Zoom to talk about various aspects of calling. And they're absolutely phenomenal resources that if you ever get the time to join in, because it's an open session. There's usually a bit of a formal presentation and an open session that goes afterwards. And the conversations usually run 1 hour for the formal part, about an hour to an hour and a half of general discussion afterwards. But some of these sessions have gone on for up to 11 hours because it just got that interesting and they wanted to get into that detail. So you never know what's going to happen. Having said that, our record was 11 hours, but I think we did a session not too long ago, which was 1 hour, and we finished about 15 minutes after that because there was just nothing more to say on it at the time. So you never know what's going to happen. But like I said, it's stuff that's done absolutely free of charge. And it's to look at that. And, we're always looking for people if they want to present. I had Wendy come up and give us a session on what she was doing, and she owes me another session, hint, hint. You were on the development of what was going on with your weekly introductions and what you were doing in the park, and that approach that you were taking to getting dancers dancing. Just to follow up on your session, we said we'd have a follow-up next year. Hint, hint.
Okay, that's good.
Always looking for people.
Okay, yeah. When you look
I think,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, when you look at the people on the screen here, basically, I mean, you've got many of these people who are just excellent mentors, teachers, and when I say teaching, of course, that's my biggest claim to fame was everything I do is related to teaching. I don't know why, because I didn't start out that way, but I found out that I do, like you, love that part of it. But people like Daryl and Don and yourself and Mickey and anybody else that's doing it. You're looking at the real teaching aspect of it. And my phrase that I like to say, telling ain't teaching. And that's what a lot of callers think it is. You just tell them, well, on a Zoom, you just go back there and the other one comes forward. There, I told you how to do it. Now you know it. And that's not teaching.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much more to it. So, uh, you know, I'm really very impressed with the people that show up on these Zoom sessions and yours and Don's and Daryl does a just a huge contribution to the activity. And it's funny because Brian he's retired, Daryl's retired. Um, I guess you. Oh, well, Don, when was the last time you called a dance? You know, it's wild, but you're still contributing like crazy. And this is the beauty of this part of the activity, is its community. Uh, so I'm very glad to have had you on the program. I feel with Mel every time I watch one of those sessions, and I go back. I'm one of those guys that goes back and I look at previous sessions of Don's and Mel's, and I'm always learning something. And I'm almost 60 years into this activity as a caller, and every time, even with beginners, I learn something. Um, and I just want to kind of
I
what
appreciate
Mel
that.
said on his best dance. My best dance was the last dance I called last night. That was the best dance I ever called. And you know what?
Every dance should be the best dance you can
Yes.
call.
Next Tuesday night when I call that dance, that'll be the best dance I've ever called. And, you know, but the longer I do it, the more fun I have with it. So hopefully the dancers feel the same way. And it doesn't matter whether it's beginning level or challenge level. It's all got its own place in the sun, and it's all for fun, no matter what. And which I think
Well, if
Mel.
I had to give advice to any caller on that, I would say if you're not having fun doing it, then it's time to quit. Because if you're not having fun,
Yeah,
you can be damn sure they're not going to be having
yeah,
fun with you.
absolutely. So I do want to thank that. Oh, by the way, next week we were supposed to have Steve Cotman, but he had some family thing come up that he had to take care of, and some of you will remember Steve as a young kid. You know, he was Lee's little boy, and that's the way I remember Steve. But this thing today, next week that he's got to do, it's a grandparent thing, and I get so frustrated with these guys that keep getting older, you know, and we don't. I don't get it. So instead of Steve next week, we're going to have Barry Clasper. Okay, so I see a few Canadians here going, "Oh yay, a Canadian." Okay, so anyhow, uh, does anybody
Yeah,
have any
we're beginning to
questions?
dominate. Yay, go Canada.
Yeah, you're right. Well, actually, I'm a U.S. citizen, but you know, I've been in
Nah,
Canada.
you're still a Canadian.
Yeah, I've been in Canada since '84, and I love it. Yeah, Robin, oh, unmute yourself.
Um, Mel, as I recollect, you were one of the early adopters of Zoom square dancing. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if I was one of the early adopters, but we were doing Zoom sessions and team sessions in 2019 as a semi-formal type of meeting. We were having online sessions with Skype, or actually, and in some cases, actually using Messenger, MSN Messenger through Facebook. Zoom came out, and it was one of those things that, oh great, this is before Corona and everything else. It was relatively new, but it was cheap and easy to use. So we started using Zoom back in, I believe it was February 2019, that we started doing our semi-formal group get-together training. And then about a year after that, the suggestion was made, you know, we're talking about all these things. Can I record this? Can I record this? Yeah, recording was easy. And we thought, well, why don't we actually record these sessions, because they're becoming a more formal presentation because we're getting larger people coming. And Mark Hart he got on board and he said, well, okay, well, he hosts the Orange County Collar website, and he started putting them together, cataloging them, and then with COVID and everything else that was hitting at that time, they became more and more prolific. And then, of course, you had the GSI Collar School. Don Beck was doing his sessions. I was doing my sessions. So Mark was putting these all together and putting links as one reference site to all this kind of collar training. And it just sort of built from there and carried on. Now, we used to get something like 100 people in some of these sessions while COVID was on. Now we get probably 25 to 30 people a session, but it's still there. We do get a lot of people that go back and watch the videos on their time because, as I said, I'm in Australia, you're in California, so it's probably about 6 p.m. there, 7 p.m. there. We got people that were here from Europe. It's I think dark 100 there now, and probably about you're in Sweden, Tage?
Finland.
So that's even
Finland.
1 hour,
So
1 hour further.
you're about 1 a.m. now.
It's past midnight. Yeah, it's 1 a.m.
Yeah. So it's people international, and this is one of the powers of these types of sessions. If you can attend, you attend, and actively participate. Mickey is a very active participator in this, as are a lot of people. But because you can record them, or because people like Mark and Don and Dan, they put these up available, you can always go back and look at them with the resources that are there and the material that's there. And it's like a collar school to the nth level. In a collar school, you get these fantastic curriculum subjects, but the expectation is, here's a bunch of material. Now you got to take it home and do all the work and try and figure out what it means. Whereas with these is, here's all the material. You got to take it home and figure out what it means, but we're going to go through it with you step by step. And the only difference is, with the exception of people like Yolanda from Prince George and whatnot that actually get groups together to practice on Zoom, the difference is you're getting all of that stuff that you want to learn to make your calling better, that you can take and practice it, rather than here's feeding from a fire hose, now practice it, where you don't understand it. We try to get the understanding. Now you can take it and practice on your own. And then there's other callers like Tom Miller. Don Beck does stuff with mental imaging. I think Daryl does a lot of training and mentoring with new callers, where you actually get to practice this stuff under the tutelage or the mentorship or the watch the live. Some of it's there. So it's taken your baseline caller school, which I absolutely support, but to that next degree of, now what does it mean? And that's why these sessions, I find, are so very, very important. So yeah, it's 4 years now. So I put up on the last session, can't believe it's 4 years. We've had roughly, just, I think last session was 150 sessions that we had done in the last 4 years.
That's fantastic. Anybody else have any questions? Good. Now we know everything there is to know about Mel, and almost.
I don't know about that, but
What's your
we
favorite?
all have our secrets.
Yeah, that's right. What's your favorite food?
I don't really have a favorite food. I would say meat.
Oh, one of the
Mainly because my wife doesn't eat meat. She used to eat a little bit of mince or very thinly sliced roast beef or some bacon, but now she doesn't even eat that. So, and that's when you know you got a keeper, when she doesn't eat meat, but I'll have sausages or I'll have roast pork or I'll have something cooked for me for supper.
That's good.
That's when I know I got a keeper.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Alrighty, gang. Well, I thank you all very much for showing up today, and hopefully we'll see you next week and a few others. Remember, it's Barry Clasper. I don't know how well I'll get the word back out. I put this on Facebook virtual square dance site. It's on the gay community calendar. At least I think it is. I asked them to put it on there. And usually it shows up in Facebook for the next week. Carrie had asked if there's some way I can send out a reminder uh, to individuals, I guess, as a reminder that, it's coming up. I don't know how to do that yet. Something I'll have to look at, I guess. So if anybody knows how to do that, great.
Joe, if I could just make a suggestion, there's two sites, there's Square Dance callers and there's newbie callers.
Yes.
Most new callers and most mentoring callers visit those sites regularly. And one of the things that even though it may not be in some of these faces that have been in square dancing or some of these faces that are prolific in square dancing, is a good opportunity to make that contact and network. So if you could post the link there, that would be really good as well.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm on those groups as well. So.
And Carrie, yes.
Just go ahead.
Carrie, yes, I do other dancing. I don't cue or anything else, but I do other dancing. I love ballroom dancing. I love dancing. I'm not as good as I used to be because I don't have full use of my leg anymore, but I'm getting back into it and keep trying.
Super. Okay.
And your wife does ballroom dancing with you, I presume. And your wife does the ballroom dancing with you, I presume.
Well, we just go out and dance.
Yeah.
I don't do formal ballroom dancing, but I'm not one of those that does the what do you call it? The grade 8 high school clinch, hug, and rock dance. I like to actually dance.
Yeah.
Mind you, there's something to be said about the old-fashioned clinch, hug, and rock back and forth dance.
Well, what they say, there's no hugging and patting on the dance floor, but
Actually, that's one of the reasons I took ballroom dancing in high school, because, and please do not hold this against me, but I found that if you know how to dance and you know how to hold a form and you know how to lead, you can get away with a lot of stuff on a dance floor under the sake of dancing.
Well, the other side of it, yeah, go ahead.
I don't mind because it's fun.
Well,
earlier you told us it was because you wanted to get laid.
No, that's why I started square dancing.
Well, the other side of that is
I just assumed it applied to everything.
yeah, right. Yeah. Well, although there's
you paint us men with such a bad, albeit true picture.
Yeah. Although there's
Guy
no
is looking at me with
patting on the
absolute
dance
disgust.
floor, there's no dancing on the hugging and patting floor, so don't worry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Duna, but you came in late.
Hello, Duna.
Yeah. Yeah, but it'll be on Facebook?
I know, I just wondered if you were running overtime.
Yeah. No,
I beg your pardon?
It was great. We learned everything there is to know about.
Well, I want to say thank you very much, Joe, for.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to say thank you very much for having me in, and it very much appreciate. Also very flattering. I think sessions like these are absolutely invaluable. It is great if we hear names. Like when I started calling, I heard the name Don Beck. I heard the name Daryl Clendenin. I had records. These are, and please don't take this wrong, these are the myths. These are the legends that were in the background. You heard them up there, Tony Oxidine, Daryl and Don and Al Stevens and all these other people. And they're so in the background, but the legacy that they've left in recordings, the legacy they've left in teaching, the legacy they've left in methodology. You can't go to any caller school without hearing mental image calling is one of the prime methods of calling. And if you're interested, here's a book by Don Beck. That will come out everywhere you go, but those names don't really have a meaning until you put a face to them. And sessions like this, sessions like Don's Zoom session, what Daryl's doing online, all these other kinds of things have brought our world so much closer together as callers to open up that network and realize that, hey, I didn't know Don had a bed and breakfast, so he doesn't anymore. But if I ever go to where Don lives, I'm not going to give your address there, Don, but if I called him up and say, hey, Don, I'm in town, he'd probably invite me over to stay the weekend and just talk shop or make that, because our legends and our mentors and our ideals are real people, and they ceased being the name on a record label, the name on the book, the highfalutin experts, to somebody that is just a person that I can respect and I can learn from, and hopefully steal a lot of his ideas and claim them as my own when he's no longer here.
Oh, okay.
Because that's what we as callers do. There's no such thing as plagiarism in square dance calling, thank God.
No, that's
I
called
think, Don,
research.
you made one of the best comments a while back about all these callers that wrote calls and everything else, and somebody asked you something about, do you get paid a royalty every time somebody calls Ferris wheel? Because for those of you who don't, that's Don's call. I think he said something like, no, and he doesn't want to, because he'd think about how much money he'd have to pay everybody else when he uses one of their calls. So it's, that's the essence of this is for everybody, but these are the guys that made calling what it was during its greatness, and there's so much material in their heads to learn from, so it's so great to have them.
Okay.
Well, isn't this supposed to be about Mel instead of all the rest of us?
This is Mel's opinion.
Yes. Yeah, we have to listen to Mel. Okay. Yeah.
You guys are still on the pedestal, but I'm able to climb the stairs to get a closer look at you. How's that? Is that a better analogy?
It's embarrassing.
It's true though, and you know it.
It's much, being at the top means we could fall off.
Well, that's why that statement about you want to be careful who you step on your way up the ladder, because you don't know whose butt you're going to have to kiss on the way back down. So you want to be humble all the time, right from the beginning, which these guys are. And I've picked callers I know, for instance, to be interviewed, callers that I admire. And there will be some relatively newer callers, because it'd be interesting to find out their take on how they're getting started, how they're getting helped, and what's their beginning process. So, we'll have quite a variety of people on this as we go. Right now, like next week will be Barry Clasper, Steve Kottman will be in June, Di Green's in May. Who else was on here? Brian Clark, you're coming up soon. Mickey's going to be on. I'm going to try to get Daryl to come on eventually. He's awfully shy. He's a really shy guy. You can tell because he talks very little ever, right, Daryl? Yeah.
Do I know you?
You've got Mickey and Tony in March. I think
Yep.
you had Mike Sikorsky also in March.
Well, Mike is still a tentative, because I've got a cottage clinic in Florida that I'm waiting on, but hopefully one way or the other we get Mike on there. I got my book here. I should have had my whole sheet just to be safe, but we got, it's okay. February, February. Patty Green, yeah.
I think you got Wade Driver coming up at the end of the month as well.
Wade's the end of this month. He's the 29th. Another guy that's going to be a lot of fun is Larry Letson. Larry can tell stories. Oh my God, he recorded on Mac and ESP ESP, but Royal. He's been around now. He's a retired caller. He retired. I don't understand that part. I don't know how you can retire from calling. They're going to have to pry that microphone out of my hands, because it won't burn. We got Daryl Lipscomb coming up. Tony Oxengiant, Mickey at McAtee, Lauren Smith. Now Lauren Smith has done gazillion Zoom calling, and kept the activity so alive during the COVID years. Yeah, Brian's in May. Brian Hotchkiss, another crazy guy. He'll be fun. Just the stories he can tell, and I get I get such great ideas for my calling from these guys just listening to them. I've researched material from Mickey and Daryl and Brian. So it's just amazing.
Joe, don't be so passive on it. I don't research material from Mickey and Daryl and Don. I blatantly steal it.
Okay.
We may call it researching it into our repertoire, but hey, let's be honest. I'm
That's
stealing
true.
this stuff. It's good.
That's true. Yeah, so we got Steve Edlin, Denise Carbonell's going to come on, Mike Dussault. They started the Zoom sort of a thing in many ways. Just lots of people. So we'll see you next week for Barry and